Imagine standing on a windswept ridge in Alaska, where the cold bites deep into your bones and the horizon stretches forever across snow-capped peaks, massive blue glaciers, and an endless wilderness. This is not just another state, it is a land forged in ice and fire, a place where human history has been written in extremes for over 14,000 years. From the first brave souls who crossed the ancient Bering Land Bridge, hunting mammoths under the midnight sun, to Russian fur traders carving out an empire in the frozen north, from the ridiculed Seward's Folly that became America's greatest bargain, to the thunderous gold rush that turned dreamers into millionaires overnight, and the black gold of Prudhoe Bay that reshaped the entire nation. Alaska has survived devastating earthquakes, world wars fought on its soil, catastrophic oil spills, and now the rapid thaw of climate change that threatens its very identity. This is a story of unbreakable resilience, ruthless ambition, hidden riches, and a fragile future hanging in the balance. How did a frozen wasteland, mocked by critics, become one of America's most strategic and valuable treasures? Stay with us as we uncover the epic saga of Alaska, the eternal frozen land where history freezes and explodes. At the northern edge of the North American continent, where polar nights stretch for months without end and the midnight sun lights up the sky for 24 hours straight during summer, lies a land destined to become legend, Alaska. Spanning over 1.7 million square kilometers, this is no mere expanse of ice, endless taiga forests, or towering mountains. It is a silent witness to humanity's journey across thousands of years. From the footsteps of ancient hunters crossing the Bering Land Bridge, to waves of European colonizers, gold fever that shook the world, oil booms, world wars, and the global environmental challenges of the 21st century. Alaska's history is a tale of human resilience against harsh nature, ruthless resource exploitation, hidden wealth beneath the ice, and the high-stakes future of our planet. Let us explore this epic journey in depth. From its ancient roots to the warming Arctic winds of today, we begin far before written records, around 14,000 to 10,000 years before the Common Era. As the last ice age slowly receded, bands of hunter-gatherers from what is now Siberia crossed the Bering Land Bridge, a vast land corridor linking Asia and North America that now lies submerged beneath the Bering Strait. They are the direct ancestors of Alaska's diverse native peoples who endure to this day. Imagine their lives, the Unangan or Aleut people of the windswept, foggy Aleutian Islands, masters of hunting sea mammals like whales and seals from traditional skin-covered boats called umiaks or bidarkas, the Sugpiaq and Inupiat along the frigid northern coasts, relying on igloos and animal skin clothing to survive temperatures of minus 50 degrees Celsius. In the southeast, the Tlingit and Haida built magnificent wooden villages adorned with totem poles, recounting lineages and myths, while the Athabascan in the vast interior followed caribou migrations and developed profound knowledge of medicinal plants and animal tracks.
Holding. Keep pushing.
Their cultures were rich and adaptive. Oral traditions passed down stories of Raven, the trickster creator who shaped the world from darkness. They developed complex social systems, intertribal trade networks, and ecological wisdom that allowed them to predict salmon runs or Arctic weather patterns. To them, Alaska was never empty wilderness or an unclaimed frontier. It was sacred ancestral land where humans were an integral part of nature's cycle. Yet the arrival of outsiders would dramatically disrupt this balance, an impact still felt today, through lost languages, restricted traditional hunting, and struggles to maintain identity amid globalization. The major turning point came in the 18th century. In 1741, an expedition of the Russian Empire led by Danish navigator Vitus Bering and Captain Alexei Chirikov reached Alaska's shores. They were not mere explorers, but seekers of wealth and furs, especially the sea otter pelts prized in European and Chinese luxury markets. What began as a scientific and commercial venture quickly evolved into full colonial rule. In 1784, fur trader Grigory Shelikov established the first permanent Russian settlement at Three Saints Bay on Kodiak Island. The Russian-American Company was chartered in 1799 under Alexander Baranov, known as the Lord of Alaska. From headquarters in Sitka, New Archangel, they built wooden forts, Russian Orthodox churches, and an extensive trading network that even reached into California. This era was filled with complex nuances. On one hand, the Russians introduced positive elements, Orthodox Christian missions that built schools and churches, and exchanges of technology like metal tools and firearms. On the other, the dark side was far more dominant. Native peoples were coerced into the fur trade system, often as forced laborers or virtual serfs. European diseases such as smallpox and measles caused mass deaths. The Unangan population, for example, plummeted from around 15,000 to just 2,000 within 50 years.
Direct violence also erupted,
including the massacre at Refuge Rock, Aleut, in 1784, where hundreds to thousands of Sugpiaq were killed by Shelikov's armed men. Conflicts with the Tlingit in Sitka highlighted fierce indigenous resistance. Economically, the fur trade generated enormous wealth for Russia, but also led to local extinctions of sea otters and ecosystem degradation. Geopolitically, Russia's presence in North America alarmed Spain, Britain, and later the United States, sparking diplomacy and boundary treaties, like those of 1824-1825. By the mid-19th century, the winds of change were blowing hard. Russia was financially strained after the Crimean War against a British-French-Turkish coalition, fearful of losing Alaska by force. Without compensation, especially to the British, they decided to sell. On March 30th, 1867, U.S. Secretary of State William H. Seward successfully negotiated the purchase of Alaska for $7.2 million, roughly 2 cents per acre for a territory twice the size of Texas. The process was dramatic. Fierce debates in Congress, corruption accusations, and widespread public ridicule. Many newspapers called it Seward's Folly or Seward's Icebox, a useless frozen wasteland filled only with ice and polar bears. Critics argued the land was too remote, too cold and worthless for American farmers. Yet Seward held a long-term vision, Alaska as a strategic base for Asian trade and untapped natural resources. For Russia, it was a relief to divest a difficult-to-defend asset. On October 18, 1867, in Sitka, the Russian flag was lowered and the American flag raised in an official ceremony. Alaska became the Department of Alaska under U.S. military control. The early American period was slow and challenging. Non-native population remained tiny, law enforcement minimal, and corruption rampant among early officials. Native peoples, completely excluded from the purchase agreement, lost sovereignty over their ancestral lands, an historical injustice that later fueled 20th century indigenous rights movements. Economically, salmon canning emerged in the 1870s, laying the foundation for a fishing industry that remains vital today. Everything truly exploded in the late 19th century. The discovery of gold in the Klondike region of Yukon in 1896 triggered one of history's greatest gold rushes. Tens of thousands of stampeders from around the world flooded into Alaska via treacherous routes like the Chilkoot and White Passes. Boomtowns like Skagway transformed from tent cities into hubs of chaos, where figures like the notorious conman Soapy Smith ruled with criminal gangs. Women such as Klondike Kate and countless homesteaders added compelling gender dimensions to this frontier saga. Gold did more than change demographics. The population surged. It also drove infrastructure. Railroads were built, ports expanded, and news of the rush spread globally through newspapers. Yet the darker nuances were many. Brutal working conditions in the mines, conflicts with native peoples over land claims, disease, starvation, and environmental damage, including river pollution and deforestation. For the U.S. economy, it brought fresh wealth. For Alaska, it cemented its image as the romantic last frontier.
Agreed.
Entering the 20th century, Alaska slowly matured as an official territory in 1912. The struggle for self-governance was arduous. Federally appointed governors often clashed with locals, demanding greater autonomy. President Theodore Roosevelt and the National Conservation Movement established vast, protected areas like the Tongass National Forest, the largest national forest in the U.S. today, highlighting early tensions between resource, exploitation, and preservation that persist. World War II ushered in a new era. Japan attacked the Aleutian Islands in 1942, occupying Attu and Kiska, the only U.S. soil held by an enemy during the war. Thousands of Aleut civilians were forcibly evacuated, with many dying in mainland camps due to poor conditions. The Aleutian Campaign, known as the 1,000-Mile War, involved tens of thousands of American and Canadian troops battling extreme weather as much as the enemy. Victory reinforced Alaska's strategic importance as a North Pacific stronghold, a role that continued through the Cold War. with radar and missile bases facing the Soviet Union. Post-war, the push for statehood gained momentum. Alaskans felt marginalized, they paid taxes, but lacked full congressional representation. After lengthy debates on January 3, 1959, Alaska became the 49th state. This was not an ending, but a new chapter. The Great Alaska Earthquake of 1964, measuring 9.2 in magnitude, was the strongest ever recorded in North America. Tsunamis and destruction devastated Anchorage, Valdez, and coastal communities. The tragedy tested resilience, but also spurred modern reconstruction and awareness of geological risks in the Pacific Ring of Fire. The next major explosion was oil. The 1968 discovery at Prudhoe Bay transformed Alaska forever. This massive reserve triggered construction of the hybrid 300-kilometer Trans-Alaska Pipeline, completed in 1977, carrying oil from the North Slope to the port of Valdez. The economic boom was extraordinary. Jobs proliferated, state revenues soared, and the permanent fund dividend provided annual checks to every resident. Yet serious nuances and implications followed. Pipeline construction crossed sensitive lands, sparking environmental protests and indigenous rights claims. The Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act, NCSA, of 1971 was the largest such agreement in U.S. history. Native corporations received 44 million acres of land and billions in compensation, but it also shifted traditional communities toward corporate business models. The 1989 Exxon Valdez oil spill, which fouled over 2,000 kilometers of coastline and killed hundreds of thousands of birds and marine mammals, became a symbol of industrial disaster, a costly lesson about risks in fragile ecosystems. In the contemporary era, Alaska faces intertwined challenges and opportunities. Its economy still relies on oil and gas, commercial fishing, mining, and a booming tourism industry that draws millions to Denali, glaciers, and the Northern Lights. Native peoples are experiencing a cultural renaissance. Traditional languages and arts are reviving. Native corporations are major economic players. Yet issues of health, education, and poverty in remote villages remain complex edge cases. Climate change poses an existential threat. Melting permafrost causes coastal erosion and village relocations like Nutak. Glaciers retreat rapidly, and an opening Arctic Ocean brings new shipping opportunities. Alongside geopolitical tensions with Russia and China over resources, from a military perspective, Alaska remains crucial with advanced bases. Environmentally, it serves as a global laboratory for Arctic studies. The long-term implications are profound. How to balance economic development with preserving the wilderness that defines America's frontier spirit? How to meaningfully include Native voices in decision-making? And how will Alaska, as part of the United States, shape global Arctic issues like climate change and new trade routes? Alaska is more than a chapter in a history book. It is a living mirror for humanity. From ancient hunters in harmony with nature, Russian fur traders hungry for profit, gold rush dreamers, pipeline engineers, and modern climate activists all tell the same story: resilience amid extremes. In this frozen land, the future is always thawing, filled with uncertainty yet also hope. What will the next chapter bring? Will Alaska be the first major victim of climate change or a model of sustainability? Only time, our human choices, and wisdom in honoring ancestral legacies will decide. Thank you for joining this epic journey. If Alaska's history teaches one lesson, it is this: beneath the piercing cold lies a fire of resilience that never dies.